Officer Mark Taylor didn't believe in first impressions, especially not with dogs. He had worked in the K-9 unit for over a decade and had seen his share of overhyped pups who couldn't handle the pressure of real police work. When he was first introduced to Rex, a young German shepherd with bright amber eyes and an almost too perfect posture, Mark assumed he'd be another disappointment. The dog was sharp, no question. He could complete every training course in record time. He followed commands, responded to signals, and never flinched in the face of loud noises or sudden distractions. But there was something else too, something harder to explain. Rex didn't just obey. He observed. He acted. Sometimes it seemed like he was thinking one step ahead of the humans around him, which made him both impressive and unpredictable. The first few days were rocky. Mark believed in structure, repetition, and consistency. Rex, on the other hand, had a wild edge. On one of their earliest patrols, Rex broke formation to sniff around a closed alley behind a gas station. Mark pulled him back, irritated, only to hear later that a theft had taken place there just minutes before they arrived. That wasn't the last time Rex followed his instincts instead of the official plan. It didn't take long for word to spread around the station. Some officers loved the dog's intensity. Others thought he was reckless. Too much heart, not enough discipline, one sergeant had said, shaking his head. Mark stayed quiet, unsure where he stood. He wanted to trust the dog, but trust in this job had to be earned the hard way. At home, things were different. When Rex wasn't in uniform, he became a completely different animal, calmer, gentler, even affectionate. He'd sit by Mark's feet while he read or lay across the doorway at night, guarding the house like it was a fortress. Mark lived alone, and over time, Rex's quiet companionship filled a space that had been empty for years. One night, after a particularly tense day at work, Mark sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching Rex chase fireflies across the yard. The dog paused, glanced back at him, and tilted his head, as if asking a question Mark couldn't quite hear. That was the moment he realized it. Rex wasn't just a partner. He was something more. A protector, a companion, and maybe, just maybe, the kind of hero this world didn't see coming. Evergrove wasn't the kind of place where people expected danger. It was a quiet town nestled between rolling hills and old oak trees, the kind of place where neighbors waved from their porches and kids rode bikes until sunset. But something had shifted in recent weeks. Doors were being locked earlier. Porch lights stayed on through the night, and people started whispering about things that didn't feel right. It began with a break-in on the east side. An elderly couple returned from church to find their back door pried open and their belongings scattered. Nothing valuable was taken, just drawers opened and furniture moved. The next week, a second home was targeted, then a third. Each time, the intruder left little behind, except a sense of unease. There were no witnesses, no security footage, and no clear pattern. The break-ins weren't violent, but they felt calculated, like someone was testing the waters. Parents grew nervous. Dogs barked at nothing in the night. One woman swore she saw someone watching her from the trees behind her yard. But when police arrived, no one was there. Mark and Rex were assigned extra patrols in response. Every night, they cruised the neighborhoods, watching for movement, listening for sounds that didn't belong. Rex seemed more alert than usual. His ears twitched at every rustle. His nose hung out the open window of the patrol car, sniffing the wind like it carried secrets only he could understand. One night, just past midnight, Rex suddenly growled low in his throat and barked toward a narrow alley between two homes. Mark slowed the cruiser. They got out and walked the alley, flashlight scanning the shadows. Nothing. No prints, no motion. But Rex lingered, sniffing along a chain-link fence as if someone had been there only moments earlier. Mark took notes, filed a report, and moved on. But something about Rex's behavior stayed with him. The dog wasn't reacting out of habit. He was tracking something the rest of them couldn't see yet. At the precinct, officers debated what to do. Some wanted to bring in more patrol units. Others believed the break-ins were the work of bored teenagers. But Mark trusted Rex's instincts. He had seen that look in his eyes before. The focused stare, the steady movements. Rex wasn't chasing shadows. What neither of them knew was that the next incident wouldn't be another break-in or a missing watch. It would be something far more personal. And this time, the cost of waiting might be too high. Emily Carter's 7th birthday was supposed to be a day full of laughter, balloons, and cake. Her parents had set up a backyard celebration with pink streamers, picnic tables, and a small inflatable castle. The weather was perfect, sunny, warm, and just breezy enough to keep the kids cool as they ran across the grass in a blur of excitement. Family and neighbors had gathered to celebrate. Laughter echoed down the street. Emily, in a yellow dress with tiny sunflowers, was the center of attention. She was known for her big smile and endless curiosity. She didn't sit still for long, and that day was no exception. One moment she was chasing bubbles with her cousins, and the next she was gone. It happened so fast, no one could say exactly when. Her parents assumed she was in the bounce house. Then someone thought she might be in the kitchen getting juice, but after a few minutes of calling her name and checking every corner of the house and yard, panic set in. The gate at the back of the yard stood open, swaying gently in the wind. Her mother's voice cracked as she screamed Emily's name. Her father ran barefoot down the street, hoping maybe she'd wandered off to a neighbor's house. But every door they knocked on gave them the same answer. No one had seen Emily. Within 20 minutes, the birthday party turned into a search mission. Guests fanned out through the neighborhood. Someone called 911. Officer Mark Taylor was already on patrol nearby when the call came in. He turned the cruiser sharply at the corner and pulled up to the Carters' home just as more officers arrived. The scene was chaotic. Parents clutched their children close. A balloon drifted slowly into the sky, unnoticed. Mark got out of the vehicle and looked down at Rex, who was already alert, ears perked. Emily's mother rushed toward them with a tiny yellow sweater. "She wore this just yesterday," she sobbed. Mark knelt down and held the sweater to Rex's nose. The dog sniffed once, then again, and let out a sharp bark. Without hesitation, he turned and sprinted toward the back gate. The scent trail was fresh. Mark followed closely, adrenaline rising in his chest. This was no ordinary search. A child was missing, and every second mattered. As Rex led them into the woods, deeper and deeper into shadows and silence, Mark whispered under his breath, "Find her, boy. Please, find her." Rex moved like a shadow through the trees, his nose low to the ground, every muscle alert. Mark stayed close behind, flashlight slicing through the thickening woods, heart pounding with each step. The light from the neighborhood faded quickly, replaced by the deep greens and browns of the forest, damp with the scent of moss and earth. Emily's trail was faint, but Rex never hesitated. He paused only to sniff again, confirm, then continued with growing urgency. Mark had seen Rex work before, but this was different. The dog was locked in, focused in a way that felt almost human. There was no room for distraction, only the mission. The trees grew closer together, and the terrain changed from soft grass to uneven rocks and twisted roots. Branches scraped against Mark's sleeves. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out, but otherwise the woods were silent. Mark's radio crackled briefly with updates from other officers searching nearby, but none of them had found anything yet. Rex suddenly stopped and barked, a single sharp sound, then turned left, crashing through a dense patch of brush. Mark followed without question, pushing aside branches as thorns tugged at his uniform. They reached a shallow creek, the moonlight glinting off the water's surface. Tiny footprints led across the muddy bank. Emily had definitely been here. Mark bent down to examine them, heart twisting. "She's close," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Rex barked again and took off, following the scent upstream. The woods seemed to close in tighter now. The trees older, the undergrowth thicker. Mark's legs burned, but he didn't stop. He wouldn't stop. Then they reached a clearing. In the middle stood a rusted wire fence, about 6 feet high, wrapped in vines and half collapsed in places. A weathered sign hung crookedly on one post. It read, "Private property. Do not enter." Rex ran up to the fence, sniffed at the bottom, and then paced back and forth, whining. Mark shone his flashlight beyond it. The land on the other side looked forgotten. Tall grass, crumbling structures in the shadows. Rex let out a low growl, then backed up 2 steps and leaped over the fence in one clean motion. "Rex!" Mark called out sharply, instinctively. But the dog was already gone. Mark stood frozen for a split second, torn between the badge on his chest and the urgency in his gut. Then he grabbed his radio, called it in, and climbed the fence. There was no turning back now. Mark dropped down on the other side of the fence, landing hard on uneven ground. His boots sank slightly into the soft earth, overgrown with weeds and layers of fallen leaves. The air felt heavier here, like the forgotten property carried years of silence. He scanned the area with his flashlight. Broken fences, an old rusted swing set, and a collapsed barn stood like ghosts in the darkness. Rex was nowhere in sight. "Rex!" Mark called in a hushed tone, not wanting to scare the girl, if she was even here. He listened. Then he heard it. A sharp bark in the distance, followed by a series of quick yelps. It was coming from the far side of the lot, beyond a line of dead trees. Mark ran, branches snapping underfoot. As he cleared the trees, his light landed on an old wooden shed, leaning dangerously to one side. The roof was half caved in, and the door was jammed shut with a rusted latch. Rex stood in front of it, barking furiously and pawing at the wood with focused desperation. Mark rushed forward and dropped to one knee beside the dog. "What is it, boy? Is she in there?" Rex barked once, then pressed his nose against a narrow gap beneath the door and whimpered. Mark pressed his ear to the wood. At first, there was nothing. Then a tiny, trembling sound from inside, a faint sniffle. Then a small voice, barely audible. "Hello." Mark's throat tightened. "Emily. Emily, it's Officer Taylor. You're safe now. We're going to get you out, okay?" The girl didn't reply, but he heard her scoot closer to the door. She was alive. Mark grabbed the latch and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. It had rusted solid. He stepped back and kicked the door once, twice, then a third time, finally cracking the old wood enough to wedge it open. As soon as the gap widened, Rex pushed through first, crawling inside and disappearing into the shadows. A moment later, he reappeared with his tail wagging gently, guiding a small figure forward. Emily emerged slowly, eyes wide and tear-streaked. Her yellow dress was dirty and torn, but she was unhurt. She blinked at the light, clutched Rex's fur with one hand, and didn't let go. Mark knelt beside her. "You're safe now. We've got you." Emily didn't speak, but she reached out with her free hand and hugged Rex around the neck. And in that moment, Mark didn't care about fences, rules, or reports. All that mattered was that Rex had found her, when it truly counted. Mark carried Emily in his arms as they made their way back through the woods. Rex trotted close by, never leaving their side. The little girl clung to Mark's shoulder, her small fingers twisting the fabric of his uniform. She hadn't said much, just a soft "thank you" when he had lifted her from the shed. Now she rested her head against him, exhausted but safe. The woods, which had seemed endless and eerie just minutes earlier, now felt less threatening. Mark's flashlight lit the path while Rex moved ahead, sniffing and pausing, leading them out like he was retracing every step with quiet confidence. Mark tapped his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Taylor. I have the child." "Repeat, I have the child. She's safe." The response came quickly, relief flooding the operator's voice. "Copy that, Officer Taylor. EMTs and backup en route to your location." When they reached the fence, Mark gently handed Emily to a paramedic waiting on the other side. Her parents were already there, rushing forward with cries of joy and tears. Emily finally smiled, reaching toward them. But before she let go of Mark's shoulder, she looked down at Rex and whispered, "My hero." Rex wagged his tail, panting happily, his tongue lolling from the side of his mouth. He looked up at Mark, who gave him a quiet pat on the head. The dog had followed a hunch, broken protocol, and led them to a child no one else would have found in time. Later that night, back at the station, Mark sat in the debriefing room. A lieutenant leaned forward, fingers steepled. "You crossed a restricted fence line," he said calmly. "You understand the department policy, right?" "I do," Mark replied. "And your dog acted without command." Mark hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir." Silence hung in the air. The lieutenant tapped his pen on the table. "But you found the girl." "Yes, sir. Because of Rex." There was a long pause. Then the lieutenant leaned back in his chair. "There will be a review," he said. "You know how it works." Mark stood, understanding the weight of the words. Understood. He walked out into the hallway and found Rex waiting for him near the lockers, tail wagging slowly. Mark crouched beside him. "You were right, buddy," he murmured. "You knew." Rex licked his hand, then leaned into his shoulder. And in that quiet moment, Mark knew, whatever consequences came next, they had done the right thing. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Local news stations ran headlines like "K9 saves missing girl" and "Brave police dog breaks the rules, finds child in abandoned shed." Social media lit up with photos of Rex, tongue out, tail up, beside the little girl he had rescued. Emily's parents gave interviews, their gratitude pouring through the screen. "Without that dog, we might never have seen our daughter again," her mother said, holding back tears. At the precinct, Rex became a celebrity overnight. Officers who had once doubted him now greeted him with pats, treats, and praise. Someone even hung a handmade banner in the break room that read "Rex the Rescuer." But behind all the celebration, Mark knew the review board hadn't forgotten the rules that had been broken. The official meeting came 2 days later. Mark stood in front of a panel of supervisors, while Rex waited outside with another officer. The room felt colder than usual. One of the board members, a stern woman with silver hair, cleared her throat. "You made a decision that went against direct protocol," she said. "You entered private property without a warrant and allowed your K9 partner to act without instruction. Do you acknowledge this?" Mark didn't flinch. "I do." "And would you make the same decision again?" He looked her in the eye. "Yes, ma'am." Without hesitation. A long silence followed. Papers shuffled. Pens tapped. Then, to his surprise, the stern woman nodded slightly. "Good," she said, "because sometimes doing the right thing means knowing when the rules aren't enough." The board issued a formal notice, a written warning in Mark's file. But no suspension. They acknowledged that Rex's instincts had proven correct, and that the swift action likely saved the girl's life. The message was clear. Rules matter, but judgment matters more. When Mark walked out of the room, Rex leaped up to greet him, as if sensing the outcome. Mark knelt and scratched behind his ears. "You're not in trouble, partner," he whispered with a grin. "You're a hero." That evening, a small ceremony was held in the station lobby. Emily and her parents came, and she wore a new yellow dress with a tiny sunflower pinned to her hair. The chief presented Rex with a custom medal engraved with the words, "Service, Courage, Heart." Emily stepped forward, holding something in her hands, a hand-drawn picture of Rex with a golden cape and the words, "My best friend," written in crayon. As the cameras flashed and the applause filled the room, Rex didn't bark or pose. He just sat calmly beside Mark, tail thumping against the floor, eyes full of quiet pride. Weeks passed, but the story of Rex's heroism continued to ripple through Evergrove. Children waved whenever the patrol car passed by. Store owners taped newspaper clippings to their windows. At the elementary school, Teachers used Rex's story during lessons about bravery and kindness. For a town that had once felt uneasy, things finally began to feel right again. Emily returned to school, and though she was quieter than before, her smile slowly returned. She often drew pictures of a brown dog with a shining badge and floppy ears. When asked about her favorite day ever, she didn't mention the birthday party. She always said, "The day Rex found me." At the station, Mark and Rex resumed their patrols. Life moved forward, but something had changed between them. Their bond had always been strong, but now it felt unbreakable, built not just on training, but on trust, courage, and something deeper. Mark didn't need to give commands anymore. Rex seemed to know what he needed before he said a word. Then one day, a letter arrived from the state police headquarters. Inside was an invitation. Rex had been nominated for the Medal of Valor, the highest honor a service animal could receive in the state. The ceremony would be held in the capital, and the governor himself would present it. Mark looked down at the letter, then at Rex lounging beside his desk. "Looks like we've got one more road trip ahead, partner." The ceremony was simple but powerful. As Rex walked across the stage in front of hundreds, he wore a special harness polished just for the occasion. The governor smiled, bent down, and pinned the medal to the side of Rex's vest. Flashbulbs popped. The crowd rose to their feet in applause. When it was over, reporters swarmed around Mark. "What makes Rex so special?" one of them asked. Mark glanced down at the dog beside him, his loyal friend, who had once broken the rules not for glory, but because he sensed something no one else did. "He listens to more than orders," Mark said. "He listens to people, and he never gives up." That night, back in Evergrove, Mark and Rex drove the familiar roads under a sky full of stars. The streets were quiet, peaceful again, and as the cruiser rolled through town, Rex sat proudly in the passenger seat, head high, eyes sharp, ready for whatever came next. Because heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear fur and a badge.